All right, so today, let's do a deep dive on Iceland. I know you want to go deeper than just the touristy stuff, so we're really going to get into it. We've got all this research right here. It looks like a good mix of history and culture, and like you said, all those amazing landscapes.
And what's so interesting is how connected those landscapes are to the culture. You'll see that again and again as we go through all this.
Okay, so volcanic island in the North Atlantic. Vikings settled there over 1,000 years ago. That's the basics, I guess. But I'm seeing some stuff in here about Iceland's geology that I bet most people don't know about.
Yeah, it's actually one of the youngest land masses on the planet, geologically speaking.
Yeah.
And that explains why it's got such intense volcanic features. Like we're talking craters that are still smoldering lava fields that go on forever. It's like a geologist's dream come true.
Smoldering craters.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, you definitely had me at smoldering. Now I see why they call it the land of fire and ice. And speaking of ice, we can't forget those glaciers.
Of course. Those glaciers are actually from the last ice age, and they've carved out some seriously breathtaking scenery. Glacial lagoons, waterfalls, fjords. Visually, it's incredible.
I know, I'm getting lost just looking at these pictures. But you know what else really stands out to me? That whole Viking heritage. Our research says that's still a huge part of life in Iceland today.
Oh, absolutely. You see it everywhere in how strong their communities are,
Yeah.
how important storytelling is to them, even their music. There's a really impressive amount of respect for their heritage.
It's like they've figured out a way to hold on to their past but still be totally present in the now. One thing I saw the sources mention was that Iceland has one of the highest literacy rates anywhere. What's the deal with that?
It goes back to that storytelling tradition we were talking about. Literature, especially the sagas, is a really big deal in Icelandic culture.
Yeah.
They even have this thing called reading aloud hour during Christmas when families all get together to read stories and poems.
That's so cool. It's like their love of stories is woven right into who they are as a society. Speaking of cultural treasures, I gotta ask about the elves and trolls. Is that just a tourist trap, or do people really believe in them?
It's more than just a tourist thing, actually. Some Icelanders really do believe in Holdufolk, which means hidden people.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes elves and trolls. You'll even see these little elf houses built into the hillsides.
Get out! That's wild. So we've got fire, ice, Vikings, and elves. It's like something straight out of a fantasy novel. Okay, so we've got the landscape, the history, the elves. What about the food, though? I was just looking at this stuff about Icelandic cuisine, and it doesn't sound like your typical, like, burgers and fries kind of deal.
You're definitely right about that. Icelandic food is all about what's fresh and local. And of course, with them being an island nation, seafood is a really big deal.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what kind of seafood are we talking about here?
Well, I mean, you've got your usual stuff like cod and haddock, but then it starts to get interesting. Ever heard of hockerel?
Hawker? Not
Yeah.
exactly something you hear every day. What is that?
Fermented shark.
Fermented shark.
Uh,
Okay, you've definitely got my attention. What does that even taste like?
hmm. Let's just say it's definitely an acquired taste. Really strong, kind of pungent, not for the faint of heart. It's been a traditional dish for centuries, though.
Wow. Fermented shark. I'm adding that to my list of things to try. Or maybe just things to read about first. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from smoldering craters to fermented shark. Sounds like Iceland really does have a little something for everyone. Let's shift gears a bit, though, and talk about what it's actually like to visit. You've done a ton of research on this. What are some things our listeners should keep in mind if they're thinking about planning a trip?
Well, first off, the best time to go really depends on what you're hoping to see. Like if you want to experience the midnight sun, then you'd want to go during the summer solstice, which is toward the end of June.
Mm.
But if seeing the northern lights is on your bucket list,
Mm.
then winter is the time to go, especially between September and April.
Makes sense. Summer for endless days, winter for aurora borealis. What about the cost of traveling to Iceland, though? I've heard it can be a pretty expensive place to visit.
It can be, yeah, but there are definitely ways to do it without breaking the bank. One of the best things to do is look for accommodations that have kitchens, like guest houses or apartments. That way you can cook some of your own meals and save a lot of money.
That's a good tip. How about getting around? Is renting a car absolutely necessary?
I'd say it depends on how much you want to see. If you're just planning to stick around Reykjavik and maybe do a few day trips, then public transportation is a good option. But if you want to explore the ring road and see all the different landscapes, then renting a car is definitely the way to go.
Good to know. Okay, I gotta ask about the language barrier. I'm guessing my high school Spanish isn't going to get me very far in Iceland.
Actually, you might be surprised. Icelandic is the official language, but a lot of people speak English, especially in the touristy areas.
Hmm.
You should be totally fine.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay, last but not least, what about the weather? We're talking about the land of fire and ice here, so I'm guessing packing for a trip there could be a little interesting.
You're not kidding. The weather in Iceland is seriously unpredictable. You could get sunshine, rain, wind, even snow all in one day. Definitely pack layers.
So yeah, pack for every season, that's the takeaway there. It sounds like being prepared is kind of the name of the game in Iceland. But it's interesting. That unpredictability, that feeling of like anything could happen, it actually seems like it's a big part of Icelandic culture itself.
Oh, for sure. And you know what ties into that? Remember us talking about Iceland's geology, how the landscape is always changing because of the volcanoes?
Uh,
I think that makes people really aware of how nothing stays the same forever.
right. Like if you always had this idea that your backyard could be rearranged by a volcano, it would probably change how you look at life, wouldn't it?
Totally. Yeah. You'd learn to be flexible, to roll with the punches, to appreciate what you've got right now.
Yeah.
And I think you see all of that in Icelandic culture, that resilience, being connected to nature, how important community is.
That makes me think about those elf houses we were talking about. Do you think it's possible that that ever-changing landscape plays into those beliefs? Like if you grow up in a place where the earth itself feels so alive, maybe it's not such a stretch to imagine other beings sharing that space.
It's a really interesting thought, and it kind of shows how it's all connected, right? The geology, the folklore, the values that people have, it all comes together to make Iceland so unique.
Yeah, it's like this giant puzzle, and we've only just started to put some of the pieces together. So for everyone listening, we've gone from these smoldering craters and massive glaciers to ancient stories and fermented shark, all to try and get a handle on this tiny island that's had such a huge impact.
We've seen how the landscape itself has shaped the culture, how their history is still so present today, and how even a place that feels a world away can teach us important stuff about resilience and adapting and why community matters.
Stuff that's more relevant now than ever, I'd say.
Yeah.
So we hope this deep dive has made you curious to learn even more, not just about Iceland, but about how connected our world really is and how checking out new places, even if it's just through books and research for now, can open up all these new possibilities.